Well, welcome back everybody for short lecture number 5 on the work, this time on the work breakdown structure. This is where we get to take plan scope, collect requirements, plan scope management, collect requirements, and define scope, and put it into a tool that will drive us to the solution, something more practical. So as we do this, we're going to create the work breakdown structure, a part of scope management. Though we'll also use this work breakdown structure over and over and over again in integration management, in time management, or schedule rather management, in risk management, etc. So it has many, many uses, but it's a part of scope management. And it is identifying the deliverables that we just described in the scope statement. Identifying the deliverables and describes the work in detail in a dictionary. So it's hierarchical, I've mentioned. It's a hierarchy. It looks like an org chart that you see in the middle of the slide. But that doesn't have the details we need. The details are in the WBS dictionary. So I have two things here. In Create WBS, I am creating my actual hierarchical work breakdown structure. And I'm creating my WBS dictionary, which are the details inside of each box there. Okay? So I'm showing the scope broken down into manageable pieces or packages. The very lowest level is always called the work package. And it's a visual way of seeing the project and helping people understand their roles and responsibilities and the deliverables that are required. Like I mentioned, it's shown as a hierarchy. And I build it by decomposing. So in the very top box, you might even consider the scope statement that I just finished in define scope process. So I have the scope statement and I decompose it. I break it down. In this case, I created a Wright Brothers bicycle company and began to break down the work to build a bicycle. I need a frame, I need a front wheel, I need a back wheel. I could have further decomposed all those boxes. I only did it for the wheels to show you decomposition in action. So the front wheel is very different from the complexities like the gear mechanism of the rear wheel. So I decomposed it to find my deliverables at the work package level. That's the lowest layer of the work breakdown structure. Largely a top-down effort. It doesn't have to be in the real world. There are other approaches. But for the exams, a top-down effort. Okay. Just know when I say hierarchical, I generally mean what looks like an org chart, but just realize that hierarchical can take other forms. Here is a work breakdown structure I did for International Project Management Day for the Project Management Institute, the local chapter. And you can see it's hierarchical, but by its indentations, less like an org chart. But for the exams, please consider hierarchical. Generally think of an org chart, what that looks like. Okay? So, and it's a decomposition hierarchically of the total scope, the planned work contained within the WBS down to the work packages. Okay? Again, here's a better shot of what the work breakdown structure looks like. This was a work breakdown structure that I did for a company that said, hey, we would love for you to do an Army BRAC, that's Base Realignment and Closure Commission, an Army BRAC project with our team. This is just a very simplified version, but level 1 of the WBS would be like that scope statement. Level 2 would be some decomposition into major areas like build new facilities, move the equipment, and of course notice the project manager and his or her team are also an aspect of the work being done as part of the work breakdown structure. And then level 3, I might consider my work packages, the lowest layer. To build new facilities, I need carpentry and electrical work. To move the equipment, I might move the combat equipment and the admin equipment, having different requirements, etc. Okay. So now I'm into the inputs, tools, and outputs, beginning on page 157 of the PMBOK guide and following. Okay, so when I do this, I am going from defined scope now to creating the work breakdown structure. And remember I said the WBS is hierarchical. It's broken down to work packages. Later on, we're going to break it down into activities. But in scope management, the lowest level we talk about is work packages. But later on, there are activities, which is the work needed to complete the work package. That's frankly an aspect of schedule management. And I also want to point out in the work breakdown structure, so I'm going back to this hierarchy, there is no relationship intended. I'm not saying build facilities first, and then you must move equipment, and then you must have a PM. No relationship is intended here. This isn't just about breaking down the scope into manageable pieces and knowing what ties into the next as I build my product. There are no relationships intended here. There are no dependencies, like I've got to do one before the other. It's just a hierarchical view of all the work that has to be done on the project. Okay. So my inputs, tools, and outputs follow here. Of course, as an input, generally, as is the case, the project management plan, which is going to tell me how, especially the scope management plan, because I'm still in scope management, so think of that first, how the WBS will be created. When I think of project documents, again, I'm in scope management, so I'm going to think requirements, documentation, and the traceability matrix. My tools are expert judgment, and we've already mentioned decomposition, breaking it down into lower levels, and then my output. My output for the create WBS process, I already have my scope statement. I just built my WBS and my dictionary that goes with it. So now my output actually becomes my scope baseline, which is formed by three things: the scope statement, the WBS, and the WBS dictionary. That definitely is a test question on the certification exam, if not on the end of chapter exam. What are the three things that form a scope baseline? You must have a scope statement, a WBS, and a WBS dictionary. Note this, the WBS and the dictionary are never separated. They always belong together. The WBS and the WBS dictionary. And that is part of the process. As I mentioned, there are other approaches to developing a work breakdown structure. For the exams, at your level, consider it just top down, starting from the scope statement and working your way down to the work packages. However, there are other approaches, and I just touch on them here. Organizational specific guidelines or a bottom-up approach has been used, but not for any of your exams at this level. This is a one-slide summary of the work breakdown structure, and I usually start on the right. Notice it's hierarchical. No relationships intended. It completes the scope baseline. So notice down below in A and B and C, the three of those together are foundational for the project, and those define my scope baseline. That's what my scope baseline is. It's my scope statement, the work breakdown structure, and the WBS dictionary. And notice that the baseline must be clear, unambiguous, traceable, consistent, and complete. The baseline must be clear, unambiguous, traceable, consistent, and complete. On the left, 1 through 9, you have some key concepts of the work breakdown structure, many of which I've already mentioned. And on the bottom, you have some of the advantages of going to all this effort to build a work breakdown structure. Okay? I think it's worth your time to review. That's it for Create WBS, which as an output gave me my scope baseline. My scope baseline is formed by combining the scope statement, WBS, and the WBS dictionary, all the details within a WBS box, who owns it, what's the time limit, what are the technical requirements, what are the quality standards, and on and on and on. That's the work breakdown structure dictionary. And the three of those pieces, scope statement, WBS dictionary, form my output of create WBS, which is my scope baseline. Okay, thanks.